Fame and excess has always gone hand in hand, but in the world of music, that mix has claimed far too many legends. So these are the brightest 1970s musical icons whose incredible talent lit up the world, until addiction dimmed it way too soon. Mama Cass Elliot. You couldn't turn on the radio in the late 60s without hearing Mama Cass. That big, warm voice from the Mamas and the Papas, it just had a way of cutting through everything else on the air. Whether it was California Dreamin' or Monday Monday, she just made those songs come alive. And yes, she was the biggest part of the Mamas and the Papas. Remember seeing her on those old TV specials, bright smile, funny as could be, and always looked like she was having the time of her life. Cass was the heart of the group, but man, fame wasn't easy on her. She worked like crazy, doing shows, recording, trying to keep up with the whole whirlwind. And the public, well, they liked her, but they also liked to make jokes about her weight. But she never let it stop her from getting up there and singing her heart out. The lady was tough, and she kept pushing through, even when her body couldn't always keep up with the schedule. When Mama Cass passed in 1974, at just 32 years old, mind you, it shocked everyone. And then came that awful ham sandwich rumor that followed her for years, which actually couldn't be further from the truth. Mama Cass died of heart failure, plain and tragic. She deserved better than that really dumb story, that insulting story. And still, to this day, whenever Dream a Little Dream of Me plays, I swear it feels like she's still out there somewhere, wrapping the world in that same warm hug of a voice. Andy Gibb. Andy Gibb's death on March 10th, 1988, it felt like a gut punch to anyone who'd watch him rise from a teenage heartthrob to an international pop star. Andy was just 30 when he passed away in Oxford, with doctors citing myocarditis. It's an inflammation of the heart muscle. It was made worse by earlier damage to his body. Though Andy was said to be sober at the time, his mother Barbara Gibb heartbreakingly admitted, quote, the damage had been done through drugs in the first place. His sudden collapse came just days after his 30th birthday, following complaints of chest and abdominal pain that led to his hospitalization. But in the late 70s, Andy Gibb seemed unstoppable. Before his 21st birthday, he became the first solo artist to score 3 consecutive #1 singles in the US. An incredible record that cemented him as the charming younger brother of the Bee Gees dynasty. But that fame came with pressure few could handle, and Andy's growing white stuff addiction soon began to unravel everything he'd built. The addiction fueled depression and paranoia, eventually costing him major gigs, including co-hosting Solid Gold, a Broadway role in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and even his relationship with actress Victoria Principal. And by the mid-1980s, Andy was fighting to turn things around. Yes, he went through several hospital stays and spent time at the Betty Ford Center, determined to make a comeback. He even signed a new deal with Island Records and moved back to England, staying in a cottage on his brother Robin's property while planning his next album. But sadly, his years of drug use had taken a silent but permanent toll on his heart. Andy Gibb's tale, it remains one of pop music's saddest chapters. A bright, beautiful talent whose monstrous fame brought out a monstrous addiction demon inside. Rest easy, Andy. Karen Carpenter. And decided to create a dream come true. All right, let's talk Karen. When you think of the Carpenters, you think of that incredible velvet voice, pure, clean 70s pop. But behind all that perfection was this heavy, heartbreaking struggle. Karen's death in 1983, at just 32 years old, was officially heart failure, but it was directly caused by her battle with anorexia. This was the early 70s though, and nobody in the public eye was talking about eating disorders. They were so misunderstood that when fans saw Karen looking painfully thin on stage, they actually worried she had cancer because they didn't have the words for what was actually happening to her. The root of it, pressure and control. She was a phenomenal drummer first, but then she got pushed right into the spotlight as the main singer. She constantly felt this pressure to maintain that squeaky clean image and a certain weight, which felt like the only part of her life she could actually control. Come on, spin your head, you'll starlight in your eyes are blue. The illness became her way of fighting back against all the demands from the industry and her inner circle. She had this heartbreaking quote from that time about getting control in a life that felt completely managed by everyone else. It's one of the most tragic stories because it really shows how isolated she was. Her bandmates even admitted they didn't know how to pronounce anorexia, let alone treat it. In the final desperate years, she was taking high doses of dangerous substances like laxatives and a toxic vomit-inducing drug called ipecac syrup, which totally wrecked her heart. Even though she was trying to recover right at the end, telling her friend Dionne Warwick she had, quote, a lot of living left to do, her body gave out. But her death, as devastating as it was, completely cracked open the conversation about eating disorders and forced the world to start looking at it as a serious, fatal mental illness. Judy Garland. In a long history of childhood stardom leading to tragedy, this is still a tough one to stomach. The passing of Judy Garland on June 22, 1969, at the age of 47, served as a particularly grim prelude to the tragic celebrity ODs that would soon define the 1970s. This icon of so many people's childhood was found in her London home, and the cause determined to be an accidental incautious self-OD of barbiturates, which were powerful sleeping pills. This came just months after a grueling final concert series, where the beloved star was more often than not visibly frail, late, and definitely struggling. The root of Garland's lifelong addiction can easily be traced to the golden age of Hollywood's exploitative system. Beginning as a teenager at MGM, she was never allowed to just be a child. She was a commodity to be controlled. You know the story, we know the story. We've covered Judy's troubles as well as Shirley Temple's in other videos. If you haven't seen them, please check it out. Anyway, to get Judy through the endless 72-hour work shifts, studio doctors put her and other young stars on a brutal cocktail of amphetamines, nicknamed pep pills, to keep them working, followed by barbiturates to knock them out. And then toss in the relentless criticism of her appearance and weight, with executives pushing for diets to get an impossible figure. It all ended up as the kind of stuff that haunted her well into adulthood. And then Garland's adult life was a cycle of professional wins and brutal personal collapse. Thanks to financial ruin, 5 troubled marriages, and physical decline. Her own words perfectly sum up the burden of her image, as she once asked, quote, "Do you know how difficult it is to be Judy Garland?" So, on top of being a darling of Hollywood, poor Judy was also the quintessential cautionary tale, whose struggle for peace ultimately defined a tragedy. Janis Joplin. Let's talk about the original powerhouse, the queen of psychedelic soul, Janis Joplin. She was a legend, but her time was heartbreakingly short. On October 4th, 1970, just weeks after Jimi Hendrix's death, Janis was found in her Hollywood hotel room, gone at 27. This was an accidental HOD. Police said she was lying beside her bed with cash and cigarettes in her hand, a haunting image that still sticks with you. Janis was one of those artists who just felt everything. Growing up in Port Arthur, Texas, she was bullied and called an outsider, and you can hear every ounce of that pain in her voice. Inspired by blues greats like Bessie Smith, she poured her soul into every song she sang. But her wild, fearless spirit came with a heavy price.
Oh, baby, I want my whole life to be.
Southern comfort in one hand, a battle with addiction in the other. She once summed it up pretty perfectly, saying, quote, "On stage, I make love to 25,000 people. Then I go home alone." The hardest part is knowing she was right in the middle of something great. She was recording Pearl and sounding better than ever. The last thing she ever recorded was Mercedes-Benz, followed by a playful Happy Trails for John Lennon's birthday. Pearl would go on to hit #1 after her death, with Me and Bobby McGee becoming her biggest song. It's just crushing to think she never got to see how much the world still loves her music. Hank Williams.
A memory from your lonesome past.
Talk about a heartbreaking ending. Hank Williams, the brilliant songwriter, the father of modern country music, just gone. New Year's Day, 1953. Imagine he was just 29, found dead in the backseat of his powder blue Cadillac. Just on the side of the road somewhere in West Virginia. It's just a mess. He was being driven to a concert, trying to make a comeback, you know. The official story, yeah, heart failure, but come on, everyone knew the real story. Years of serious drinking and too many prescription pills. Morphine, sedatives like chloral hydrate, a terrible lethal combination. You see, he was trying to treat this awful congenital back pain, a condition called spina bifida, and it just became a cycle of addiction. His final hours, terribly sad. He had to be carried to that car, got a couple of morphine shots from a doctor in a Knoxville hotel.
Hot rod Ford and a $2 bill, and I know a spot right over the hill.
Just to stay on the road. The college kid driving him, just 17 years old, pulls over for gas in Oak Hill, West Virginia. And that's it. Hank was already stiff. And the irony, his last single, I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive, well, of course it shot right to #1 after he passed. It just adds to the whole tormented legend, a genius who burned out way too fast. What a tragedy. Whitney Houston.
I want to hold you and touch you and taste you and make you.
Pop and R&B legend Whitney Houston died on February 11, 2012 at the age of 48 in a hotel suite in Beverly Hills. Her death was officially ruled an accidental drowning, with contributing factors listed as heart disease and the white stuff. Houston was an iconic figure in music, dominating the pop and R&B charts throughout the 1980s and 90s and earning the nickname The Voice for her unmatched vocal talent. She became one of the world's best-selling artists, selling records with 7 consecutive #1 singles and achieving massive success with her film debut, The Bodyguard, and of course its chart-topping soundtrack. However, over the last decade of her life, her career and public image were increasingly marred by a well-documented struggle with substance abuse, not to mention a tumultuous personal life.
You should look inside your soul. You're halfway there.
And this led to a noticeable decline in her vocal quality and several periods in rehabilitation. Whitney Houston was found submerged in the bathtub of her suite at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, where she was scheduled to attend a pre-Grammy Awards party. Toxicology reports confirmed she did have the white stuff in her system, which the coroner's office indicated was used shortly before her death and was a significant contributing factor. Other substances, including grass, Xanax, and Benadryl, were also found in her system, but they weren't deemed to have contributed to her accidental death. Michael Jackson. This one was rough. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, the one and only. It happened so fast. He passed away on June 25th, 2009 at his LA rental, way too young at just 50. The cause? Well, officially it was ruled a homicide due to acute propofol intoxication. That's a super powerful surgical anesthetic. You know, the kind of stuff they only use in a proper hospital setting, or supposed to. Now, this is the really messed up part. MJ couldn't sleep. He was dealing with intense insomnia while prepping for his massive comeback tour. This is it. It was supposed to be 50 shows in London, and the pressure must have been unbelievable. So, his personal doctor, Conrad Murray, was giving him this anesthetic, which Michael nicknamed his milk. It was his nightly sleep aid. Yes, a highly dangerous anesthetic just to help him crash. Murray was reportedly getting paid something like $150,000 a month for this service. And on the morning he died, after a stressful night, Murray administered the propofol and then left the room to make a bunch of phone calls, which was a huge no-no, and he found MJ unresponsive when he came back. The whole world watched the trial. Murray was eventually convicted of involuntary manslaughter and got 4 years in prison for his gross negligence. It was just a devastating end to a legendary career. The This Is It concerts of course never happened, but the rehearsals were turned into a movie, which was kind of bittersweet. It was a bizarre, tragic mixture of a superstar's fame, extreme debt. He actually owed AEG around $40 million if that show failed. And of course, the shockingly reckless doctor, an absolute disaster that just shouldn't have happened. Jimi Hendrix.
Broken pieces of yesterday's life.
Jimi Hendrix remains one of the most influential electric guitarists in the history of rock music, having fundamentally redefined the instrument's capabilities and sound during his tragically brief career. Renowned for his innovative use of feedback, distortion, and the wah-wah pedal. His life and career were cut short on September 18, 1970, in London, England. Hendrix was pronounced dead at the age of 27. The official cause was determined to be asphyxia due to vomiting while intoxicated with barbiturates. The post-mortem examination says he had ingested approximately 9 sleeping pills, which was far in excess of the recommended dosage. The coroner ultimately ruled the death was an accidental OD, concluding that he had become heavily sedated, which suppressed his gag reflex, leading to the fatal aspiration. His passing marked the loss of an unparalleled musical innovator, just as he was beginning new experimental phases in his career. Jim Morrison. The story of Jim Morrison's end is seriously one of the greatest unsolved rock mysteries. After burning out on the rock scene in LA, the Doors frontman took off to Paris in 1971 to focus on poetry and chill out with his girlfriend Pamela. He was just 27 and supposedly getting his life together, but the hard living quickly caught up with him. He was found dead in the bathtub of their apartment on July 3, 1971. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure. But here's the kicker that makes it so weird. French law at the time didn't require an autopsy, and one was actually never performed. So, the lack of official confirmation immediately threw the entire thing into dispute, turning his death into rock folklore. So, what really happened? The most widely accepted rumor is that it was an accidental HOD. I'm gonna love you till the stars fall from. Now, Pamela herself has given conflicting accounts, but one popular theory suggests Jim snorted what he thought was the white stuff, but it was actually high-purity batch of H. Another much wilder story comes from a nightclub manager who claimed Jim actually OD'd in the bathroom of a Parisian club called the Rock and Roll Circus, and that his body was secretly moved back to his apartment to avoid a scandal. Another one is since the coffin was sealed and the burial was so quick and quiet, some other fans still believe he faked his death to escape the madness of fame. Either way, Jim Morrison joined the infamous 27 Club, alongside Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, cementing his status as rock's mysterious Lizard King forever. Keith Moon. Keith Moon, the wild and brilliant drummer for The Who, lived and died at full speed. His drumming was thunderous, his personality even louder, and Moon the Loon became both a nickname and a warning. He was famous for trashing hotel rooms and partying harder than anyone else, his life fueled mostly by alcohol and chaos. On September 7, 1978, that chaos finally caught up with him. Moon died in his London apartment from an accidental OD of clomethazole, a sedative prescribed to help him quit drinking. It was a bitter twist of fate. The very medicine meant to save him took his life. Do me good, do me good, do you good, do me good. The autopsy found he had actually taken 32 pills, even though as few as 6 was fatal. 26 were still undigested. His body simply couldn't take any more abuse. The coroner called it death by misadventure, which sounds about right for a man who spent his entire life playing louder, faster, and wilder than anyone else on Earth. Tom Petty.
Our old man was born to rock. He's still trying to beat the clock.
Man, this one sucked. Tom Petty was literally the soundtrack for every road trip and chill night for decades. And when he passed away in October of 2017, after just wrapping up the Heartbreakers' 40th anniversary tour, it was a huge bummer and a huge shock. Turns out the guy was in constant pain. He had played all those shows with a fractured hip that had basically turned into a full-on break. Seriously, he was a complete trooper. The official word was a mixed drug toxicity, an accidental OD from a cocktail of prescription meds he was taking for the pain. We're talking fentanyl, oxycodone, and a few other heavy hitters that were all legally prescribed.
In my ground, and I won't back down.
It was a terrible accident that unfortunately highlights the entire opioid crisis. He didn't go out being reckless, just exhausted and trying to manage unbearable pain. A total legend gone way too soon at 66. John Belushi. Man, John Belushi really was a force of nature, huh? Funny, loud, and unstoppable. One of the original Saturday Night Live stars, he made chaos into an art form with characters like Bluto and Animal House. And of course, the Blues Brothers. What started out as an SNL sketch turned into a real band with Dan Aykroyd, complete with hit records and sold-out shows. Belushi wasn't just playing a musician, he was one, and he lived every bit of that rock and roll lifestyle. But that same energy that made him a star also burned him out way too fast.
On a dusty road, good loving, I got a truckload.
On March 5th, 1982, Belushi was found dead at just 33 in a bungalow at the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles. The cause? A speedball, an accidental mix of the white stuff and H. It just stopped his heart. His death shocked Hollywood and the world and became one of the biggest wake-up calls of the era. Kathy Smith, the woman who supplied and injected the drugs, later served time for involuntary manslaughter. Belushi's passing wasn't just the loss of a comedian. It marked the end of that wild anything-goes chapter in showbiz that claimed far too many bright lights. Prince.
Saturday night, I guess that makes it alright. You say, baby, I got enough.
Oh man, Prince. What a talent, right? I mean, the absolute genius of that guy. Everyone remembers the Purple Rain era, the clothes, the hair. But he could play every instrument under the sun. And his guitar work, forget about it. He was like a modern-day Jimi Hendrix, but he could also lay down a funky track better than anyone. The thing is, he was still going strong. You'd see him pop up and looking completely original, putting out new music and headlining huge shows right up until the end.
To find the answers to the questions that you most fear.
And that's what made it such a terrible shock when we lost him back in 2016. Can you believe it's been that long now? He was only 57. And it was that prescription pain stuff, the fentanyl OD. It just cut him down way too soon. Makes you wonder how many amazing records are still sitting out there in his vault. A real loss for music, a real musical tragedy. Elvis Presley.
When you don't believe a word I say.
Now this one was a cultural earthquake. Seriously, when you hear the king, there's only one guy you think of, Elvis. He wasn't just a singer, he was the blueprint for rock and roll stardom. He completely changed music, fashion, and TV, and every performer who came after owes him a debt. He spent years absolutely dominating the charts, and was still a massive star right up until the end. That's what made it such a devastating global event when we all got the news on August 16th, 1977. Elvis was 42. We all knew he was struggling behind the walls of Graceland, and while the official cause was a heart attack,
Because I love you too much, baby.
the whole world knew it was directly tied to a severe dependence on a combination of prescription drugs. It was a massive wake-up call and a heartbreaker all in one. Most music fans still remember where they were when they heard the news. The shock was instant and worldwide. Many people wept. I'm sure some of you did. It really felt like an entire era ending. But you know what? He's still the king. He's the reason music looks and sounds the way it does today. And nobody ever sold more records. Alright, I know that was a really sad video. But hey, it's also fun to look at all these music legends together and see why did it all happen? Why did it go down like that? Because after all, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. They burned bright, they burned fast, and they left behind songs that still stop us in our tracks. So, which of these artists do you still find yourself listening to today, remembering where you were when you first heard them? Who's your favorite? What's their best song? What's a good deep cut? And And did I forget a 1970s musical icon who left us way too soon because of substance abuse or something out of their control? Well, please get down in the comments section and tell me who. Tell me all your thoughts on these stars who faded far too soon. We hope you enjoyed the video. Hit the thumbs up icon if you don't mind, it really helps our channel a ton. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a memory. But most importantly, thank you so much for watching. I'm Nostalgic Nick with Do You Remember? So keep your records spinning and your memories loud. Alright, peace now.